Mycologist. I never knew what that meant. Did anybody know what a mycologist was before? Or that this man had a title outside of his real name, Aaron? This is our local mycologist. He was born and raised in Plymouth, right? And little did we know that he was going to be our mycologist around here. He talks at the library, the trustees right over in Long Pond Road. Yeah, and we have a sign-up sheet over there if you'd like to be on his list to keep talking about mushrooms. I asked him maybe to touch a little bit on the psychedelic mushrooms. Do you know about it?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
no, they're bringing them back for mental illness. Believe it or not, that's the truth. So we might all need those. Okay, this is our mycologist, Aaron Keaton, and we may begin.
Okay. Can you guys all hear me, or would you prefer me to use the microphone?
Yeah, try the microphone.
Hello.
Yeah.
Is that good? Yeah. Okay.
Don't forget we're all old here.
No, yeah, I get it. Yeah, actually, a lot of the people that come to the events are on the older side. I don't really see a lot of people my age or kids, which I find kind of interesting. It's, more, older people than me who are actually really interested in this stuff. But yeah, I'm glad to be here, and I just want to thank you guys for letting me talk at your meeting, and thank you, Robin, for inviting me. As she said, I'm Aaron Keaton. I've been studying mushrooms since around 2019. I started college in 2017, graduated from Keene State College in 21, and by the time I was basically halfway done with my degree, I kind of learned that I wanted to study mushrooms in the Monadnock region where I went to school. It was very beautiful, there's lots of trails, so it was kind of through hiking and exploring that I was seeing so many different types of mushrooms, and I really had no idea anything about them. So when it came to be my time to do a senior project, I decided to focus on mushrooms. And one of the first things that really alarmed me was that out of the estimated 1.5 million species of fungi that there are out there, only 5% have been described in the literature. So really we have only touched, not even scraped the surface of what is out there. And for me, I really like to learn new things, and kind of discovery is important to me. So this kind of told me that I could actually make a contribution into this field, and that there was really a need to have people, talking about mushrooms and learning more about them. And so mushrooms are really understudied compared to fields like biology, ecology, or botany. There are just few people really doing this work. There's even fewer resources and programs that really focus on mycology and mushrooms. So I figured it was a field that had a lot to be done in it. They're also very undervalued for the amount of things that mushrooms can do, both as food, for medicine, and culture. People often kind of just don't really think twice about them, walk right past them. It's not something like when you see like a really cool animal or a really cool plant. Many people don't really think twice about them, as I said, and some of them are very small like this, so you really can miss them if you're not looking out for them. And often I find they're misunderstood. I was just talking with someone here about it. Mushrooms are feared, and you have a lot of people who kind of think you're crazy for foraging for mushrooms or eating them. They're obviously toxic and poisonous mushrooms, but compared to the amount that are edible or medicinal, it's a very small percentage that are poisonous. And if you just do a little bit of homework, know what you're doing, have a field guide, you can easily go out and either forage them for food or just, pick them up and study them. Any mushroom that is even toxic or poisonous is fine to handle. You just have to be really careful when you're ingesting them. And so what really is a mushroom? Well, a mushroom is really the visible part that we see. It's the fruit. But the whole organism is often unseen. It's mostly underground. And so we can see here in this picture, the thread-like network that is underneath the mushroom is known as mycelium. And mycelium is actually responsible for doing a lot of the cool things mushrooms are able to do in the environment. So all mushrooms start by a spore. Spores are microscopic. You wouldn't really see them unless you were looking under a microscope. But they are dispersed by the mushrooms. That's their main job, is to disperse spores. And once a spore lands on a substrate, such as dirt or a tree, it can germinate, and then it will grow into this pattern you see here, known as mycelium. Eventually, the mycelium knots up together, and it forms a mushroom. And then again, the mushroom drops spores, and the cycle starts all over again. And in this picture, this is, it's kind of hard to see, but when we think of a mushroom, we usually think of a mushroom with a cap and a stem, usually with gills on the bottom. But they do come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, as you'll see here. For our first, this is a couple images of the mycelium I was talking about. So you can see this mycelium if you flip over a log or look at some branches. It's this white stuff, and it really is just a network. It's very strong, it's tenacious, and it's responsible for really covering its whole landscape that it lives in to get any nutrients or food it can. Something I do is I actually sample wild fungi, so I take a mushroom that I find outside and I grow it out on a petri dish. So this blue stuff is called agar, and it's basically food for the mushroom. So any mushroom you want to study further or just kind of like make a genetic clone of it and keep it in your library, you can grow out its genetics, what you see there on the blue plate. And then eventually you can do things like grow mushrooms. So I grow mushrooms at home. And the first step to growing mushrooms is giving it food. So you sterilize grain in a mason jar often. And you can see that the mycelium has just almost consumed the whole grain in the jar. And that's its job. It really just wants to consume any nutrients it can. And it really looks almost like branches or roots, and that's how it kind of is able to travel through its environment. And so a couple of main categories of mushrooms are obviously gilled mushrooms. These are, what I said you would typically think of as a mushroom, cap and stem. You flip it over, it has gills, almost like a fish. They do come, obviously, in many forms. Some can be big like this, or they can be almost very small, which are known as mycena. There's also the boletes. There's a lot of boletes out right now. They come in the late summer, early fall. And these look similar to the gilled mushrooms. They're fleshy, but when you flip them over, they look like a sponge. So they have these little tiny holes on the bottom, and that's what tells you it's a bolete. Many of these are edible and are prized edibles. And then there are the polypores. So like the boletes, they also have a porous structure on the underside. But these guys are more tough and leathery. They often are found on the sides of trees. They can be known as conch mushrooms or shelf fungi. And they're not very fleshy. Again, they're very hard. And these are the type of mushrooms that you wouldn't really eat like on a plate, but you would make a powder or a tea out of them. And often many polypores are very medicinal. Just like the turkey tail, which is this kind of bluish gray mushroom. You find that almost everywhere all throughout the year. And then kind of like miscellaneous, the jelly fungi. So, when I was starting, my journey with mushrooms, I didn't exactly know that this was a type of mushroom. They literally look like jelly. They're very squishy. This is witch's butter, which is a very common mushroom you can find. Surprisingly, it is edible. People make like candy out of this. And then coral, another thing that I really just, when I saw it, I had no idea what it was, but I suspected it was a type of mushroom. They do kind of resemble coral, like in the ocean. They just are like these branches that stick up out of the ground. Kind of not very common, and hard to see sometimes, but they are small. And then the puffballs, there's nothing really that looks like a puffball besides the puffballs. They're usually white, sometimes tan, and they can be very small, like a golf ball, or they can be as big as a soccer ball. A lot of the ones that are purely white are very edible, and it's a huge mushroom, so you get a lot of food out of it. And so what do mushrooms really do in the environment? Well, something that we're usually taught in school is that they're recyclers, they're decomposers. In a way, they kind of bridge the gap between life and death. They often are known for breaking down dead organic matter in the environment. They are responsible for getting rid of all the leaves after the fall. They literally just eat them and they disappear. They also break down branches or logs, stuff like that. And they even can break down rock, which is really cool. They secrete enzymes that is basically a liquid that secretes out of the mushroom and are able to break down rock, which is the first step in creating soil. So our terrestrial environment really began as a very rocky place. There was no soil, and fungi were some of the first inhabitants of this earth, and they kind of paved the way to make soil and to kind of create an environment for other organisms to grow. And so they really do, play a remarkable role in our environment. They continue this cycle again and again, and they really optimize the benefit of otherwise waste material. No other organism uses leaf litter or just dead logs to consume as food. And the mushrooms don't only consume it as food for themselves, but they are able to break down that nutrients in a way where they put it back into the soil, making the soil healthier. They also sequester carbon, so trees are known for sequestering carbon, but mushrooms do this too, meaning that we have excess nitrogen, or excess carbon, in the air, which is a big contributor to climate change. And so they kind of offset that carbon in the air, kind of trying to keep the atmospheric levels at an area they should be at. And so what makes southeastern Massachusetts, where we live, a unique area for fungi? Well, if you look around, we have very sandy soil, which isn't typical of most forest ecosystems. Most forest ecosystems have very rich, nutrient-heavy soil, but our soil is, again, very sandy, is nutrient-deprived, meaning we don't have a lot of nutrients in our soil, and it leaches readily, meaning the water is not able to be held into the soil for very long. And so the trees and the plants that grow around here really over time had to form relationships with fungi to survive. If it wasn't for these relationships, most plants would not be able to grow or do well at all in this type of sandy soil environment. And so the roots really have to be as long as they can to get any type of nutrients that is available. And so what does this look like? Well, trees have their own root system. That's kind of what is in the ground. And they can only go so far. And like I said, the nutrients in the soil is very limited. So they partner up with mushrooms to make their roots even longer. So if you can see, all these different colors are the mycelium network of mushrooms that have formed a relationship with the roots. They literally grow out of the tips of the roots, extending their roots to travel farther across the landscape and get any bit of nutrients or water that is available. And not only does it connect the mushroom to the tree, it actually connects everything in the environment together. Each tree and each plant is connected through this network. And through this network, they're actually able to communicate. And so if this tree on the right or left, whatever, doesn't have enough nitrogen, and this tree over here has excess nitrogen, this tree can ask the other tree to send it over. And if this tree has, say, extra water, they kind of do an exchange. No, I'm not. It's almost known as like the underground World Wide Web, is what some people call it.
Not artificial intelligence, right?
No. It's really cool what these mushrooms can do. I mean, it's not communication like talking to each other, but in a way they can sense when one organism doesn't have something it needs, and if they have excess, they send it over. And this is known as a symbiotic relationship. So unlike a parasitic relationship where something is eating or feeding off another organism for its benefit, and the other organism is depleting their health, Both organisms in a symbiotic relationship are getting a mutual benefit. And mushrooms that form relationships with trees are known as mycorrhizae fungi. So basically, fungi are responsible for maintaining this type of environment. In a lot of environments, almost all terrestrial ecosystems have these symbiotic relationships. And so mycorrhizae, these fungi, they provide stability to the ecosystem, they help tolerate changes in pH in the soil, and they even increase resistance to soil-borne diseases. So they're really just keeping the different plants and trees that grow here healthy. And so mushrooms play this large role in the environment. It's really crucial, it's really necessary. But how can we as humans benefit from fungi? There's many different ways, but lots of mushrooms are medicinal. They're food sources. Almost all mushrooms have antibacterial properties, anti-inflammatory properties. They contain all essential amino acids, meaning they're great sources of protein. They can help support our immune system, keeping us healthy. They can improve cognitive function. So mushrooms like lion's mane are looking on, there's research that look to that mushroom to be used to offset dementia and Alzheimer's. So they're very good for your brain. They can help protect cells from damage, meaning they're antioxidants. And they can support a healthy gut microbiome, which is basically a fundamental part of keeping us healthy. You have a question?
One thing.
Yes.
Are those found in the mushrooms that you see at the grocery store?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I find that a lot of grocery stores only have like button mushrooms. But if you can find a more diverse set of mushrooms, those are great. Most mushrooms, like I said, do have all these factors, some more than others. So like, for example, in this picture, I made a tincture out of reishi. Reishi has been used medicinally for thousands of years, and reishi is one that is known for having anti-inflammatory properties. So some are more known for different properties and have different levels, but all mushrooms are good for you. They might not all have the medicinal properties, so you kind of have to like do your own research and know which ones. But there are some that are just known for being very good for you, like reishi, turtle, lion's mane, stuff like that.
What about the ones that are coming up right now out of my grass?
Yeah, well, so some of them, but I will touch a little bit how you start to ID mushrooms. There isn't, one thing you have to look for. You're actually doing a decent amount of work when you're IDing a wild mushroom. But again, the mushrooms that grow from the earth are, the healthiest ones you can grow. Growing mushrooms in a commercial environment is great, but if you can find edible mushrooms outside, yes, those are very good for you. And stuff like the reishi grows everywhere and is very easy to ID. So it's just a matter of, doing your homework, getting a field guide, looking at the mushroom that's in your yard and comparing it to other pictures in your field guide. And yeah, foraging for mushrooms is a great way to get some of these benefits.
One up in contain and they have a yellow mushroom.
Is it kind of big?
I don't know if he's growing or not.
Oh, you could just see maybe like the top of it almost?
But it disappeared a couple of days later.
Yeah, mushrooms have a really, really fast life cycle. Sometimes they can be gone in a matter of hours, and likely they're going to be gone in a day or two. Basically, yeah. So once a mushroom starts to grow, they really only need a few hours to grow to their complete size, and then at that point, they start to decay really quickly. So yeah, either someone picked it or it just, they almost just wilt away into the ground. Yeah.
Well, some of the wildlife eats them, like, I don't know, bunnies do.
Yeah.
Squirrels do, chipmunks maybe?
Yeah, and deer. So a lot of things outside eat them as well. Yeah. And so I added this in actually last minute because Robin said she kind of wanted me to touch on psychedelic mushrooms. But yeah, we're just starting to do all this research and science about all that stuff I was just talking about, like proving that the mushrooms have these different beta-glucans, and different medicinal compounds. But indigenous people have known this for a really long time. Today, when we get sick or have a problem, we often depend on a doctor to diagnose us. We're depending on, the pharmaceutical companies to give us medicine, having a drugstore, stuff like that. It's very, that's how we do things in this society. But the people who were inhabiting this earth thousands of years ago, who were really the first people here, they were much more in tune with nature. The land gives us everything we need, and they knew that, and that's the only thing they had. So finding medicinal fungi and finding medicinal plants was how they treated any of their ailments, any of their sickness. And so this image is kind of abstract and kind of hard to understand, but this is a shaman figure, and you can see that it has kind of depictions of mushrooms all over its body. And so this was found at one of the oldest archaeological sites that has prehistoric rock art in Algeria. And these rock paintings were known for documenting changes in climate, animal migration, and human evolution. So thousands of years ago, when people were making these drawings, they drew things that they wanted to carry on for other people to know about. And something that was in these paintings was a shaman-like figure, so a healer, and they had mushrooms all over them. And what people have kind of drawn from this is that mushrooms were being used in healing ceremonies, and they were regarded as very high sacraments to the people who were using them. And they really were being used to heal people mentally and physically. Another cool example, one of the oldest mummified bodies we have ever found was the Iceman. We found him in 1991. He was 5,000 years old, estimated, and he had two different mushrooms with him when he was found. And so he had Fomes fomentarius, or the tinder polypore, and Fomitopsis speculina, the birch polypore, two very common mushrooms. And so the first mushroom, known as the tinder polypore, he was using it to carry fire over long periods of time. So you could hollow these mushrooms out and drop embers in them, and the embers would stay lit in these mushrooms for a really long time. So not only did it allow you to start a fire reliably, but you could travel for miles, and then when you get to your next site, you would have fire. So this mushroom played a large role in the fires that made all human evolution possible, creating food, having warmth, stuff like that. And then the birch polypore. This is a medicinal mushroom that they believe he was using to treat a parasitic infection that he had. So he both had a mushroom as a tool and a mushroom as medicine. And like I said, this man was living 5,300 years ago. So this just goes to show how long mushrooms really have been being used.
That mummified body,
Yeah.
those mushrooms were still with it?
Yeah. So not alive, but like I said, these are polypores, so these are very hard mushrooms. You don't even really have to dry them out. They're already dry. And yeah, it's almost like a rock. Like it would just survive. It wouldn't break down. They're made of wood, and he was found frozen, so obviously the mushrooms were frozen as well. But yeah, if you have a dried out mushroom, they do last for a very, very long time. And so if you're interested in mushrooms, or you're wondering, when should I look for them, the best seasons are summer and fall. Most mushrooms also fruit in response to rain or thunderstorms. So if it's raining one day, the next day is a great day to go out and look for mushrooms. They're basically 90% water, so they really do need a lot of water to grow. Many mushrooms fruit after the hot summer months have passed, so late summer, early fall is the best season. And during the late summer, you're mostly going to be finding amanitas, russulas, lacterias, and boletes. And so how to identify and document mushrooms? This is really important because if you're wondering what you're seeing, or you're wondering if you could use the mushroom, or you just want to know what it's called, you have to take a few steps to start the identification process. The best thing that I do is take a lot of pictures. So you obviously want to get a picture of the mushroom, We also want to flip it over and get any pictures of the underside, which will show if it has pores, teeth, gills. Some mushrooms bruise blue, a lot of leaves do. So if you cut them in half, you can kind of expose that feature. And all these things are very important in the identification process. Lacterius, they actually bleed a white liquid when you cut them, so capturing all of this on your phone is very important. You also want to take, step back and take a picture of just where you found the mushroom. Many mushrooms have relationships with trees, as I was saying, so if you know the type of tree that was near the mushroom, that is very important in the identification process. What I do is I often post all these mushrooms online, and there's websites like Mushroom Observer or iNaturalist, where you can post all your pictures, and then other people, even experts are on these websites, will chime in with their identification. And once you have a few identifications, you can get a pretty good idea of what you have. You also obviously want to be using a field guide. I recommend getting like at least 1 or 2 field guides that are pretty good, so that you can kind of compare the pictures. There's limited pictures in the books, so having a couple field guides is good. You can also take spore prints. So each mushroom has a unique spore print color. This picture that is black on the silvery thing, that's tinfoil. You basically just cut the cap or the top of the mushroom off and lay it flat on tinfoil or paper. You put a drop of water on the cap, cover it with a cup, and the next day you'll have a spore print. So this spore print was very dark purple, black, but they could be white, they could be brown, cream colored, rust colored, many different colors. And in a field guide, you will see spore print color. And that is one of the most important and like one of the original ways of identifying mushrooms. And so as I was, question? Yeah, so teeth are kind of, if you know what like a lion's mane mushroom is, they're really just these individual strands, almost like hair, and they just hang down. You kind of have to see it to know it, but yeah, they're called teeth. But as I was saying in the beginning of this talk, a lot of this work is being done by, just fresh mycologists like me, or people who are really interested in mushrooms, or you're a hiker, stuff like that, you're a naturalist. A lot of people who are making these big contributions are just people who are interested and take the time to take really good pictures and post them online. And, other people all over the world who are actually doing, say research can use these pictures, because not everyone can be outside every day on every trail in every location. So just taking the extra step of taking pictures of these mushrooms, posting them online for other people to see is really important. It's known as citizen scientists when people who are just interested contribute important data. And I did include a poster that's on the back island. There is a Northeastern Challenge happening right now. I'm a part of a group called Fungi, who is looking to document rare and endangered fungi. So I think there's about 15 to 20 species that they're really looking for. They don't come up every year. So we're trying to see, where they are and, if they're even here still, in efforts to protect them even farther. So some tips if you're going to be out collecting mushrooms, either to just, look at, to show to other people, or possibly if you're interested in foraging for edible mushrooms. Again, the peak season in New England is April to November, so that's when you kind of want to be out there. Having a basket is really handy. It also allows you to spread spores as you walk, because baskets, have holes in them. So as you pick your mushrooms and carry them, spores are able to drop all along the trail. Paper bags are great. Plastic, not so much, because humidity is very high in the plastic, so the mushrooms will go bad very quickly. And again, having your field guide in the field is the best thing if you don't want to bring any of these mushrooms home. You kind of just want to look at them in the field, get your ID, and go. And then something I just usually touch on is respectful foraging. If you're not really looking for food it's not too much of an issue, but if you're out looking for mushrooms, it's best to limit how much you're disrupting the soil. So some people have, mushroom knives where they just cut the mushroom and don't really, mess with the soil. Collecting for you and not, harvesting a bunch of mushrooms to sell, because people do it, especially like morels, mushrooms that are, very hard to find. People will just pick them all and try to go sell them at farmers markets and stuff like that, which is great, but over harvesting can really impact the health of species and can impact the genetic diversity in the future. You really want the mushrooms to reach near maturity so they have time to release their spores and time to repopulate before you, pick them. And I always say, take really only like a fourth, maybe half of what you see, and let, most of the mushrooms stay there to repopulate and for other people to see or pick.
Do they weather the winter, the roots and all that?
Like the mycelium I was talking about, the network.
The mushrooms. You say leave spores, but it says November.
Yeah.
We're not gonna pick them in December and January.
No, so I mean, if it's near the end of the season, yeah, pick as many as you want. But I wouldn't pick like younger mushrooms still. I would let them, stay out there until they are big enough that they already had a chance to release their spores.
But those spores make it through winter is what I'm saying. Nobody knows.
I don't want to say yes, because I'm not exactly
Well,
sure.
how do they come back up in the spring? They're gonna have been there somehow, right?
Well, so what doesn't disappear is the mycelium network. So if we look back, yeah, basically the roots. This part can live in the environment for like hundreds of years. That's why you don't want to disrupt the soil, because this network underground doesn't disappear. And so, I guess the spores in a way drop, create the mycelium network, and then that network underground, even through frost, are still there. And then when the conditions are right, so a lot of water has fallen on that soil, then that's when the mycelium is allowed to fruit.
I think poisonous, I've always been told you don't pick mushrooms that grow out of the ground, they're poison.
Yeah, so that's why it's great to have a field guide so you can kind of differentiate what is poisonous, what is not. Some mushrooms are very easy to ID. There's nothing that looks anything like them. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to find this picture. So, like this mushroom, this big red mushroom, there's nothing else that looks like that. So if you're looking for reishi and you see that, there's no toxic lookalikes. It comes down to knowing the lookalikes, because some mushrooms do look very similar. So I would avoid mushrooms that are kind of hard to ID. This mushroom is very easy to ID and is one of the most, avoided mushrooms in this whole genus of mushrooms known as the amanitas. So amanitas are mushrooms that have this bulb at the bottom and they have warts on the cap. So those mushrooms, people do not eat them, they're poisonous. They could be fatal if you were to eat a lot of them. So it's just a matter of knowing which ones are poisonous. But like I was saying, the majority of poisonous mushrooms are almost like maybe 10 to 15% compared to the rest are either edible, medicinal, or not harmful. So it is a small percentage that are poisonous, and even smaller percentage that are fatal. Many mushrooms can make you sick, but they won't kill you. So obviously foraging is something that you really need to look into. You really need to be out there. You can't just go out and say, I'm going to pick edible mushrooms today. You have to go out, take walks, get familiar with these mushrooms look like. One of the things I didn't mention was when you're taking pictures, it's great to take pictures at different life stages. So as the mushroom gets small to medium to big, they can look different. So you really just need to become familiar. And there's obviously some mushrooms that are easier to start out with, like oyster mushrooms, the reishi, the turkey tail. Morels are kind of a mushroom that you can't mistake. They kind of look like, almost like a beehive. They're very hollow with holes. So it's just like knowing what you're looking for and knowing what you don't want to pick and never taking a chance. You have to be more than 100% sure before you want to eat something. And again, consulting with other people, if you know someone like me who does this a lot, or you just take the time to talk to some people online who can kind of give you their 2 cents, you can kind of get a lot of information and go from there. But yeah, they're not all poisonous. Some of them are again really really good for you and great free food.
They will taste the same, but
Mm,
I don't like much.
yeah, no, they don't. They really don't. I don't know how to describe it, but they do all have a unique taste, and some are actually prepared differently. I mean, most people will just cook them with butter and onions, stuff like that. You can do a lot with them. The lion's mane, like I keep saying, some people actually say it tastes like crab, that it has like a seafoody like taste. There's another mushroom called the lobster mushroom, which again, some of them have like more like a seafoody like taste. That's why they're actually really good for like vegetarians and stuff like that, or just as a meat source. They can be very meaty. Just some of them do have different tastes. If you've only ever tried, the bland variety at the supermarket or like the white button mushrooms, like you really gotta try some other things like shiitake, maitake, stuff like that, because they can have different tastes and be really, really good.
These aren't edible, are they?
I wouldn't say that these are edible.
One of our residents picked these on his front lawn.
I know that they're a russula, so yeah, they're definitely a russula. You can tell because the stem is a little bit fatter. Some mushrooms, like even this mushroom on the screen, has a very, very thin stem. Russulas have almost like a fat, small stem. They don't get much bigger than this.
Just underneath. Gills?
Yeah, no, I don't know for sure this mushroom. I know it's a russula, but I'm not too familiar with many russulas that are
They smell
edible.
like mushrooms.
So yeah, something like the russulas, I'm sure there are some edible ones, but that's not a genus that I know is too big on the edibles. I know the boletes, which are the bigger mushrooms with the sponges, which are actually around a lot right now. I found some really good edible boletes the other day. I think it's known as the painted sulias. So it was this little mushroom that had polka dots on the stem. That's why it's called the painted sulias, and that was edible and it was really good.
So you ate it?
Yeah. So like I said, I've been studying mushrooms since 2019, and I don't think I ate my first wild mushroom until at least 2021. So like 2 years. Even if I did know the mushroom was this mushroom, it's edible. It's very easy to ID. Something like a black trumpet. It's an all black mushroom that resembles a horn. I didn't eat it just because the things that you guys are bringing up do resonate with people and stick with people that a lot of mushrooms are to be avoided. But I'm doing a lot of research. I am out on the trails all the time. I've seen these mushrooms season and season again. And when I felt comfortable to do it, I did it. And you just always want to cook your mushrooms very, very well. Heat also breaks down a lot of the toxic stuff in them. So as I was like, I don't want to confuse you, but as I was saying, this mushroom is toxic, very toxic. But it's actually a very historical mushroom. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it's often depicted in fairy tales. It was often in Christmas decorations. And this mushroom has a history of being used medicinally. You have to prepare it a very, very certain way. You have to boil this mushroom for a long time to kill off really any of the toxins. And then people were using this mushroom medicinally. It's not like a psychedelic mushroom, but again, it's one of those things that can induce almost like hallucinations, stuff like that. So it's not really something that most people are interested in, but even toxic mushrooms, sometimes if prepared correctly, they are used. So, that is very interesting.
Do you walk Tidmarsh or the one across the street from Tidmarsh for mushrooms?
I haven't recently. I did a few years ago. I haven't been back there. I do a lot on the Center Hill Preserve, which is in Manamet. There's right by, I forget the road, but there's a couple bogs in Plymouth that are really, really good for mushroom hunting. I want to say it's kind of off like Long Pond Road. But you know, I have my own spots, but I haven't done the Tidmarsh in a while. But obviously, you can find mushrooms everywhere, as everyone's saying they're finding them in their lawn. It's been a really good season because of all the rain, so sometimes they just pop up anywhere. But just to sum everything up, you know, why study mushrooms? Why am I even talking about this? Why are they important? They are essential to the health and structure of all ecosystems on Earth. They form fundamental symbiotic relationships with plants and trees. I believe they form symbiotic relationships with us through food and medicine and foraging. And I think they can really help reestablish our connection to nature, which is a valuable thing to be able to know more about nature, know how it works, and be more connected to it. So those are my references, and I'll just leave out my contact information. But if anyone has any more questions,